And welcome back to Kansas City Live. It's summertime, and it's time to create a space in your backyard that you'll truly want to spend time there. Jeff Wilson is an HDTV host who is quite the deckspert.
That's my job.
Wait, deckspert?
Yes, thank you.
So he's going to show us how to get our decks ready for summer without breaking the bank, and that is a key because I recently got a quote on a new deck, and it's better than $3,000 easily, up even to $5,000 to $7,000.
Easy, you can get it more expensive than that, and you want to protect that investment, right?
Absolutely.
Even on a new deck, when they tell you, wait for the wood to, sort of weather for a couple of months before you put something on it, you really should only wait no more than 30 days typically to get something on that deck because water will start to damage it right away.
Okay.
And if you have an older deck, people ask me all the time, when should I treat my deck? When's it time?
Okay. I say, wait, Jeff, when should I treat my deck?
Okay,
when is it time?
Well, I'd love to tell you, Brett. We use what's called the splash test.
Okay.
Go on your deck to where there's an area that's been heavily traveled and splash a little water on the deck. If the water soaks in quickly like that, see how it darkens the wood?
Yeah, absolutely.
Then it's definitely time to treat your deck. If, on the other hand, you put some water on your deck and it beads up like this,
oh, wow.
doesn't soak in.
Can you guys see this at home?
It's hard to, yeah.
Yeah,
it's hard to get there. But,
wow.
But if the water beads up like that, then you're okay. Even if the color's not quite right, as long as the water's beating up, you're in good shape. You don't have to treat it right now. But in this case, this deck needs to be treated. The first step in that treatment process is to clean the deck.
Okay.
Most important part.
And that's when it looks like this, when it has a clearly weathered look to it?
Weathered look to it. You want to take old finishes off, all the mold and mildew stains and all that, before you put a new finish on. Because if you don't do that, the finish won't adhere correctly, won't soak in correctly, and it won't last.
Okay, so I'm going to go get my power washer, right?
And I advise people not to use a pressure washer because it's easy to damage a deck using a pressure washer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, too much pressure, you'll actually splinter the wood up, you'll do what's called feathering, and then you've got even more problems. I say use a commercially available cleaner. You pour it into a pump-up garden sprayer, you spray it on, let's say, a 10 by 10 section of your deck that you can work in a 10 to 15 minute period.
Okay.
You let it sit for 5 to 10 minutes to work, and then you take a brush, like a plastic bristled brush like this on a pole. This saves your back.
It does?
You do a little bit of scrubbing. It doesn't take much if you use the right cleaner.
Okay.
And then
that sounds like an awfully labor-intensive job.
Cleaning is the worst part of the job, but it's a really important part. But I can clean my deck in about 2 to 3 hours. It's 450 square feet. That's kind of an average-sized deck.
Sure.
Okay. So, but it's not a lot of work. You rinse it really well with a garden hose. Let it dry for 48 hours. Then you get to the fun part. And really, finishing is the easy part, right? Putting the stain on, that's the fun part. You can go with a clear. Then there are varying levels of pigment. Tinted is a little bit of color, right? But you still see the wood grain.
It has a nice natural look to it.
Semi-transparent right here, which adds a little more color and covers the wood grain a little more, but you still see it. And then a solid stain actually covers up the wood grain completely. Okay. All right?
Now, which out of these three do you like the best?
Well, it's really personal taste. And you can even choose a clear, right? But the clear will not last as long as the tinted, which will not last as long as the semi-transparent, which will not last as long as the solid. Because what happens is the more pigment that's in your finish, the longer it will last because it will resist sunlight. Okay. So if you really want to wait 5 years or 7 years between coatings, use a solid. And otherwise, use maybe you want to show off the wood grain of your new deck, use a tinted or a clear. So
let me ask you this. If you're looking at your deck and you're trying to decide, replace it or just refinish it, what were some of the things you'd look for to kind of tell us the difference?
Sure. Now, if you have a lot of boards that are broken, cracked, that need to come up and be replaced, you at least need to replace deck boards. If you have damage underneath, I like to take a screwdriver underneath every time I treat my deck every few years, and I take a screwdriver and I poke it into all the different structural parts of the deck. If it penetrates a structural part of the deck by more than ¼ inch, you've got rot, and it's time to replace it. Especially up against the house at what we call the ledger board. Right. That's where a lot of decks fail because things get caught behind there, it gets damp, it stays damp, and then there's rot. Wow. And that's where you see those decks fail, and we see in the news all the time, right?
Away.
So,
all right, Jeff, thanks for coming in.
No problem.
That's great advice. Now I'm ready, Michelle, ready to reseal and restain that deck.